Following program is in no way intended to replace your doctor's advice or treatment program, nor should it be used as a tool for the purpose of self-diagnosis.
Well, welcome to Your Health, Your Choice. This is our first program for 2018, but I want to say at the very outset, it's a taped program. So I know some of you are used to looking at us live tonight, Wednesday nights, and you like to call in and ask questions. But for the next 2 or 3 programs, we may have to do some taped programs, and they will be replayed normal times, Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. and Sunday evenings at 7, and I believe Thursday afternoons at 1 p.m. So seeing that we don't have the live calls, I want to, at the top of the program, and then repeat the number again that you can call to ask questions or have any queries about the program. The number is 482-4269, 482-4269. So that's the number you can call during the week if you want to follow up any of the things that I discussed tonight. You have any queries, or you want to find out a little bit more about some of the programs we are running at the Anaposa Center. Now, Your Health, Your Choice, as we kick off 2018, I want to remind you that Your Health, Your Choice is really all about making choices. And at the end of the program today, I'll put on my pastoral hat and challenge you to make wise choices, because when you make wise choices, you obviously have better outcomes in life. But we want to kick off 2018. We're in the carnival season, and one of the things that many people struggle with is addictions. And I know that we have covered this sometime in the past, but addictions are sometimes very much hidden, and addictions can present in so many different forms. And there's some what we might call acceptable addictions, and some that are not so acceptable. But what we have to look at is how we define addictions, what are the effects they may have, the negative effects they may have on our health. So when we talk about addictions, I'm not just talking about the behavior, but I'm saying that that behavior may affect your health as well. And that's why we are talking about it from a health point of view. Now, we're going to kick off on talking about gambling. Now, that's a big one, because you may have thought that I would start talking about alcohol addiction or cocaine addiction, etc. But I thought I would start talking about gambling first as an addiction, because it's one of the hidden addictions that very often people don't even recognize themselves. Now, at the very outset, let me say to you, the reason I gave you that number 482-4269 is that at our center, the Anaposa Center, we run something called Celebrate Recovery. And Celebrate Recovery is for people struggling with addictive patterns of behavior, drug addiction, chemical dependency, but often other things like gambling, sexual behavior that can become addictive, pornography, things like that. So we run that program on Monday evenings at 6 p.m. So after we talk about that, we talk about these addictions, and seeing that you can't call in, you can ring that number. So why is gambling called an addiction? Well, it's risking something of value on an event that is determined mostly by chance. I want to repeat that. Gambling is risking something of value that is determined mostly by chance. So the person who is gambling is putting up something of value, such as money or property, and they're risking their savings, etc. And initially, it might start very innocently, but the outcome has an element of chance beyond the person's control. Once that bet is made, it's irreversible, and often there is no way of regaining or reclaiming what you have put on the table, as it were. Now, the problem with gambling is it is respectable. And I want to repeat that. And I will tell you why. You see, things like alcohol addiction, we often visualize that as someone maybe being down and out on the street side, etc. But gambling has become a very acceptable form of a choice, some people may say, of entertainment. So we have dressed up gambling as entertainment. But some of the research I did showed that gambling amongst college-age students is increasing, because one of the things is that it can be done on the internet. So it can be done in the privacy of your room or at home, and no one else may do it. Of course, we know that gambling can start very innocently, just with lottery tickets or raffle tickets, as we call it, or bingo. And what about sports betting? Now, that's a big thing. I think here in Trinidad, sports betting is a big thing, but especially in the UK, betting on football. And, you know, football is one of my favorite sports, and I love watching Manchester United play. But it is a big form of gambling. Slot machines, card and table games, internet sweepstakes, horse betting, internet gambling, stock market speculation. What about that one? Stock market speculation. We're now hearing about Bitcoin and about different types of cryptocurrencies. In my mind, it is a form of gambling because it's so volatile. So when we talk about gambling, it is covering a wide range of activities. How big is the problem? Well, I can give you some figures from the US. The entertainment and leisure activity, it grosses over 84 billion US dollars. Now, just think about that for a minute. 84 billion, that's bigger than our annual budget, as we are saying, as we would say here in Trinidad. So gambling is a big problem. Now, we have a clip I want to go to that just gives you a little bit of insight into gambling and why it can be such a big problem. So we'll go to that clip now, and then I'll come back and talk a little bit more about this problem.
There are lots of places for adults to gamble in Ontario. However, Jake is only 15. His parents don't have to worry about gambling. Let's meet Jake and his family. At Jake's school in Kingston, the boys like to watch a lot of sports. Jake gets good grades. His favorite sport is hockey. Sometimes, the boys like to place wagers on sports games. They mostly bet small amounts of money or objects like hockey cards. Jake's parents aren't worried because their betting is all in good fun. Jake is now 17. He gets good grades. His friends still like to watch sports, but they really like to watch poker tournaments on TV. The boys play poker once a week in Jake's basement. The buy-in is $20, but Jake told his parents it's only $5. Sometimes Jake wins, but a lot of the time he loses. His parents aren't worried because he makes good grades at school. He'll be going to university in the fall. They even bought him a lottery ticket for his Christmas stocking. Jake is living in residence at university. His friends are often busy, so Jake now plays poker online. He can gamble anywhere, anytime. He sometimes skips classes to gamble. His friends have noticed that he's tenser than he used to be. He can get angry for no reason, and he often asks to borrow money. Jake thinks about gambling all the time. He stole money from his roommate to pay off his credit card debt, but he still has 2 other cards to pay off. He even gambled away his student loan money. Jake's parents are upset. He's failing some of his classes, he looks unkempt, and he's always making excuses not to visit. What went wrong? Let's backtrack. Jake's parents are aware that Jake is betting on sports. His parents wanted more information about gambling, so they went to the parentbet.net website. His parents explained to him that he should gamble for fun, not to make money. Jake is now 17. He gets good grades. His friends still like to watch sports, but they really like to watch poker tournaments on TV. Jake's parents let him know that poker is a game that has elements of chance and is still a risky activity. The boys play poker once every couple of months in Jake's basement. Jake only bets what he can afford. Jake's parents have got to know Jake's friends, and they have talked to his friends' parents about promoting healthy gambling. At Christmas, Jake's parents decided he was still too young to have lottery tickets, so they bought him movie tickets instead. Jake is living in residence at university. His friends are busy, but Jake has made new friends and joined the soccer team. He doesn't have time to gamble online. What are you gambling on your child's future?
Well, now, that's an interesting clip because you can see that this young man started very innocently with gambling. And even during that clip, you see the parents trying to, in my opinion, trying to dress up gambling as an acceptable behavior. So I think they were actually inviting the friends and saying, well, you can play poker in the basement, etc. if it's supervised. I think that's what I got, partly from that. Now, let me just say, I think that's playing with fire. And I think gambling, now we can say moderation in all things is acceptable. That's a common phrase that we use. But when a young person starts playing poker or starts playing the lottery tickets or bingo or whatever, that is the starting point of what we call experimentation. Now, on this particular topic, I don't have the slides to show, but gambling behavior occurs on a continuum. You begin with no gambling, which I think is the most healthy way, and I want to say that without any apologies. I would strongly advise against any form of gambling. Now, the problem is that here in Trinidad, gambling has become more acceptable. So we know that horse racing, even from the very corridors of power, come down. It's the rich and wealthy sport that people are involved in, and so gambling is almost dressed up as something that is desirable. One of the points I want to make here is that we now have casinos. So there was at one point where casinos were not acceptable. Now, I know there are lots of small outlets where you can go and play these slot machines, but now, right near to where we live, there's a new shopping mall, and the most prominent outlet in that shopping mall is a casino. In fact, I want to say I discovered recently, because I had a little interaction with the parking attendants, that there's a whole area of that shopping mall now, the car park, that is blocked off because the casino owners are paying for preferred parking for the people who are coming in. So look at what is happening, because we know, and people have said to me, I need to be very cautious when I say this. We know that casino gambling is one of the most addictive patterns of behavior. And I want to say, if you're listening to me and you're getting into casino gambling, it is being dressed up in a form of leisure and entertainment that will lead to destruction. I've heard stories of people who have lost their business places, they have lost homes, houses, they have lost their families because of getting involved with casino gambling. And the problem is, when we drive our children into these malls, the first thing our children are seeing are these big casinos in bright lights, and therefore as they grow, they begin to think this is normal behavior. So what is happening with gambling in this country? It is being normalized. It is being looked upon as a norm. So no longer are we just talking about the lottery or sports betting. We're talking about bright lights. And I understand, I've never been, but I understand when you go into these casinos, you're given free food and drink, etc. And of course, we know with alcohol, inhibitions fall, and therefore you are more at risk of spending more. So I want to say to our government that they need to think again. They may be getting income and tax from these casino outlets, but we are encouraging a type of behavior that is addictive and destructive. And I'm not just saying this from a religious point of view, because some people may say, well, Dr. Khan, you're putting on your religious hat. No, 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 no. I'm not. Gambling is a form of addiction, and it can destroy your life. It can destroy your health. I have seen people fall into depression, people having losing their very income, etc., and it's a downward spiral. So what happens with gambling behavior? It starts with what I would call level 1, where we begin experimenting. It may not be the casinos, but it might be at home with the slot machines or the internet gambling, etc. It goes into a social activity. So what is happening now is that you drive into these big malls, you have preferred parking. So here's what is happening. The casinos are saying that you are a preferred person because no one else can park here. Can I say it's a deliberate ploy? You may think that I'm a conspiracy theorist, but it's a deliberate ploy to make people think that somehow they're preferred and they're being treated so well. So come in, spend your money, put your life at risk, and then you become an addictive gambler. So the end point of that is when people go into the casinos, start gambling at 12 midday, and they're gambling till 3, 4 in the morning. That's when it becomes pathological gambling. And chemical dependency and gambling is a continuum. And I'm taking this information from the Ohio Department of Alcohol and Drug Addiction Services. And what they're demonstrating is that gambling gives you the same sense of pleasure that alcohol and cocaine gives. Because when you get that first win, the chemical called dopamine is released, and dopamine is the pleasure hormone. And the problem, though, is that eventually you develop tolerance. So whereby you would have been happy to gamble maybe $10 or $20 to get the same level of pleasure, you then begin gambling 100, and then it's 500, and then it's 1,000, and then it's 10,000, and because you may have lost 10,000, you then have to gamble 10,000 more. I want to guarantee you, if casinos were losing money, they would not invest so heavily into all the infrastructure. And I would say that very, very carefully. If casinos were losing money, and I want to say those of you who spend your time, and I think you're wasting your time, your energy, you can be much more profitably engaged in other activities. I guarantee you that the casinos are not losing. The gambling outlets are not losing. We have to go to our first break. I know I've come out strongly against this. The reason for that is that gambling is the hidden addiction that is starting from a young age, and it's now going right through the continuum to very elderly people. We're going to go to our first break. When we come back, we're going to go into other types of addictions.
So if you want to live behind walls all your life and live an isolated, lonely, miserable life, go ahead. But I suggest that you tear down all your walls and let God be a wall of protection about you. And he says all of your walls will be called peace.
Welcome back to Your Health, Your Choice. This is our first program for 2018, but I want to remind you we're not live. This is a taped program I did yesterday, if you're looking at it on Wednesday night, which is our normal time. And I'll give you the telephone number again to ring because I'm talking about addictions. And I've kicked off the program coming hard at you, talking about gambling, because gambling is not often considered an addiction. And many of you might be looking at me wanting to shout at me and say, just be quiet about that, because I enjoy my little lottery and I enjoy my little lotto, is it called? I enjoy my little sports betting. Now, you know, football betting is a big thing. I don't know if it is in this country. Now, I love Manchester United. I think, well, it's hard to say they're the best team in England right now, but I still support Manchester United faithfully, but I've never taken a bet on them because I know it's the start of a slippery slope. And I ended up the last segment talking about casinos, which is now become an entertainment industry. So we are no longer seeing casinos as gambling, but I want to guarantee you that casinos are probably one of the most ruthless aspects of inviting people in to a very nice atmosphere, and it's almost seductive. It is. And I want to say to you that some may say, be careful what you're saying, Dr. Khan, because, you know, there are people out there who may not like what you're saying. But, you know, men and women of truth need to speak up, not just about addictions and gambling, but about politics and about racism. And you know, we are seeing things in the US right now, and I don't want to get into that because some people will say I'm targeting certain people. But men and women of courage need to stand up and speak up for truth. Now, sometimes it might put yourself at risk. People may target you. But if you're a man or woman of courage, a man or woman of integrity, you will stand up and speak about these things with courage. So we started off about gambling, and it's an addiction. Gambling starts at experimentation stage, and then it becomes pathological. And the same way we treat other addictions, we also treat gambling. So hopefully I'll be able to get into that also. But we do run a program at our center, the Anaposa Center, called Celebrate Recovery. It is a Christ-centered program. It's a 12-step program that we run on Monday evenings at 6 p.m. So if you need to find out more about that program, you can ring us on 482-4269, 482-4269. Now, we're going to go into more general areas of addiction. And I want to bring up slide 2. We have a slide set here, slide 2. So this slide shows the drugs. So this is more talking now about chemical dependency, alcohol, cocaine, marijuana, etc. And on the left-hand side of your slide, you see the effect the drugs has on the brain, which I'll come back on. But then, of course, we know that drug addiction can lead to homelessness, crime, violence, and we are seeing that in our country, crime and violence. I want to assure you a lot of the shootings and robberies we are hearing about is driven by addiction, by drugs. And then there are medical effects of drugs, neurotoxicity, cancer, mental illness. And then, of course, there's the economic effects of on healthcare, productivity, and accidents. So we can just come off that slide now. We are now coming into talking about the underlying causes of why would something that starts so innocently. So when we talk about drug dependency, which is when we talk about addiction, and let me just say, you know, we have talked about gambling, and now we're going into drug dependency, but that's, when I say the easy one to talk about, there's of course addictions to pornography, sexual addictions, there's addictions to dysfunctional patterns of behavior. In fact, even abuse can become an addictive pattern of behavior for the one who is doing the abuse and the abuser. So a lot of people come into our Celebrate Recovery program who are not struggling or having challenges with chemical dependency, but they are having struggles with sexual dysfunctional behavior, pornography. Now, let me just take a minute here and talk about the carnival season. And again, you know, people are going to say, well, you know, carnival is our culture. Can I just say to you that I am proud of many aspects of carnival. I'm proud of the artistic array of costumes. Well, the costumes where people are well covered. Okay, I was talking to someone about this today, because it seems that for every carnival season, the costumes become less and less, and the costs goes up more and more. And now this is interesting, because what happens in the carnival season is that types of behavior that is absolutely frowned upon for the rest of the year becomes acceptable at carnival time. And maybe the next program, I'll be talking about sexually transmitted diseases. Interestingly, on the Sunday newspapers, as I bought it just before going to church, the front of the Guardian, there was one of the carnival early carnival fetes, and I don't know if this is true, but they were joking that now you have to get permission for someone to whine on you. I know we are a Christian station, and we are not past the watershed. Watershed is 9 p.m. But I said this in church on Sunday morning, and some of the parents kind of grimaced. But there was a picture of a woman giving a man a slip saying, "I give you permission." Now, at any other time of the year, that would be unacceptable behavior. Can I say sexual promiscuity, having repeated sexual partners, is also a form of addiction, because the pleasure centers are satisfied for a short time, and then you have to get your next fix and the next fix. So when we say that a certain type of behavior is acceptable at carnival time because it's our culture, that is absolute rubbish. It is nonsense. It is giving two standards of behavior. What is acceptable behavior at one time of the year should be acceptable right through the year. So don't tell me it's okay to have 10 sexual partners over the carnival period, or to go out half-dressed and it's okay at carnival time because it's our culture, and then for the rest of the year it's okay. No, that's double standards. That's hypocrisy. That's duplicity. And our community leaders, our churches should be strong enough to stand up and speak out. Yes, we are proud of Calypso and the steel pan and the culture associated with the bands, but there are excesses that can become addictive even at carnival time. Now, we have a short clip on addictions, and I'm going to ask Josh to bring up that clip at this point.
Hey there,
Yeah.
Welcome to Life Noggin. Some things in life just feel good. Usually these things are related to our continued survival, like eating and sex. However, sometimes things that aren't good for us, like some drugs and spending way too much time online, can also give us those same feelings, and this may lead to an addiction. Inside our brains, we have a reward pathway that is located in our limbic system, the area responsible for emotions and the formation of memories. And as the name suggests, the reward pathway rewards us for doing certain actions like eating. A neurotransmitter called dopamine is released, making us pay attention to what we're currently doing and hopefully repeat that action in the future. So this is good. Our brains are telling us, hey, I'm having an awesome time eating this strawberry, I should totally keep this up. But you can see where this could go wrong if instead our brain said the same thing about drugs or harmful behaviors. Normally, when dopamine is released in our brains, it is later reabsorbed by the neuron it came from, but some drugs like cocaine prevent that from happening. This results in an excessive amount of dopamine in the synapse between two neurons, giving the user their high. Our brains, which want to maintain homeostasis or balance, will eventually adjust to some drugs by decreasing the amount of a neuron's dopamine receptors. Basically, this means that the same amount of a drug will not give the user the same high because not as many receptors are being stimulated. This is known as tolerance. And because these drugs alter the brain's neurons, withdrawal can occur if the user suddenly stops or drastically decreases their usage. The symptoms may vary depending on the drug and can include depression, headaches, vomiting, and difficulty breathing. It's important to note that addiction is not just limited to drugs and alcohol. Behaviors such as compulsive gambling can stimulate the brain's reward system in similar ways. But there is always a silver lining somewhere. Drug and behavioral addictions can be overcome. And if you know someone that needs help, check out the links in the description.
So that little clip was telling you a little bit about the limbic system, about dopamine, etc. I want to bring up a slide here, slide 4, which talks about the estimated economic cost to society due to substance abuse and addiction. So we can see that illegal drugs, and these are US figures, of course, can cost the economy up to $181 billion a year. Alcohol, so now look, interestingly, illegal drugs, which we might think is the main problem, it's costing about $180 billion, and alcohol, which is again now like gambling, more acceptable, $185 billion, and even tobacco is still hitting really high figures. So just take that in for a minute as we come off the slide. So what is addiction? Addiction is a brain disease, and it's really looking at the areas of the brain where dopamine receptors, the neurotransmitters, dopamine and serotonin, are very prominent. So one of the things we need to understand is that very often, people don't start off choosing to be addicts. So while I came out very strongly against gambling and against some of the excessive behavior that we see around carnival time, and again, I just want to say what may start off as innocent behavior at carnival time can actually become addictive later on in life. So that's why I'm saying that our behavior needs to be consistent. We do make choices, but the fact of the matter is there's also a genetic aspect to addictions, but we know that addiction is a brain disease, and it's characterized by compulsive behavior, so repetitive compulsive behavior, continued abuse of drugs despite negative consequences. So no, that's important. You would think that someone who's quite intelligent, when they see the downward spiral, they'll be able to stop drinking, stop taking drugs. But we know people who are highly intelligent who have literally wasted their lives because of the effect that that the drug has had on the brain centers when it then becomes continued compulsive behavior. And then, of course, there's persistent changes in the brain structure as addiction continues. I want to bring up slide 9, and this will kind of take us a little bit more into why addiction is like other diseases. So we are saying that addiction is now classified not just as a behavioral problem, but it's a chronic relapsing problem. It's almost, we're talking similar to diabetes, hypertension, etc. So addiction is like other diseases in that it is preventable, it's treatable, it changes the biology of the body, and if untreated, it can last a lifetime. So I want to repeat that at the very top of the slide. It's preventable, it is treatable, it changes the biology of the body, and if untreated, it can last a lifetime. And if you look at the left-hand side of your slide, you'll see first what a healthy brain looks like and a diseased brain, and you can see the differences. You can see the atrophy of the frontal cortex of the brain of a cocaine user, and it's almost similar to when we have we're talking about the heart, and on the right-hand side we see what a healthy heart and what a diseased heart looks like. So I can just come off that slide. So one of the things we want to say is that we're not playing a blame game today. We are saying that people who have become addicts need help. Very often, the pattern of addiction may have started under situations of stressful life events. For example, it might be bereavement, it might be loss of a job, and I want to say, particularly here in Trinidad right now, we have difficult economic situations that we are facing, and people may very often as I would put, quiet the pain of not being able to work. Especially men, because as men we are socialized into accepting the role of being the main breadwinners, and when we lose our jobs, or when we are not able to get a job, and we see our wives and children, our families suffering, in order to quiet that pain, we may begin to drink excessively. So it may have started with one glass of vodka or whiskey or whatever, and then it goes to 2 and 3, because remember, as I showed you with the brain centers, that the dopamine receptors are the receptors that we are looking at, and the dopamine is the pleasure hormone. So you are developing tolerance, and you need more and more dopamine for that. Okay, so we're going to go to our second break, and then we have about 15 more minutes after this, and I'll try and cover as much as possible. So we go to our second break, and then we come back to Your Health, Your Choice.
So if you want to live behind walls all your life and live an isolated, lonely, miserable life, go ahead. But I suggest that you tear down all your walls and let God be a wall of protection about you. And he says all of your walls will be called peace.
Welcome back to Your Health, Your Choice. And this is our first program for 2018, but I just want to remind you, we are not live tonight. This was pre-recorded. So if you have questions, we've been talking about a difficult subject tonight, addictions. And I started off really strongly talking about gambling, which I consider one of the hidden addictions that has become more and more acceptable in our society. And it's been dressed up now as entertainment with lots of casinos and bright lights attracting people through their doors. We need to speak up and let people know the risk they're putting themselves at when they go through these doors, and the effects that gambling may have. And then we have started talking about other types of addictions. So if you have questions, you can ring us on 482-4269, 482-4269. That's the number for the Annaposis Medical Center, as well as the Annaposis Chapel. and Sarah, my personal assistant, will take your calls, pass them on to us, and then we'll return your call. We run a program called Celebrate Recovery at number 12 Johnson Street in Coquille on Monday evenings at 6 p.m. And so we'd love to tell you about that program. It's you come and you are anonymous, and you can either say as much as you like or say nothing at all within the group. So we're gonna show another clip, and this clip goes into a little bit more detail, and it gives you a little different look at addictions.
What causes, say, heroin addiction? This is a really stupid question, right? It's obvious. We all know it. Heroin causes heroin addiction. Here's how it works. If you use heroin for 20 days, by day 21, your body would physically crave the drug ferociously because there are chemical hooks in the drug. That's what addiction means. But there's a catch. Almost everything we think we know about addiction is wrong. If you, for example, break your hip, you'll be taken to a hospital and you'll be given loads of diamorphine for weeks or even months. Diamorphine is heroin. It's in fact much stronger heroin than any addict can get on the street because it's not contaminated by all the stuff drug dealers dilute it with. There are people near you being given loads of deluxe heroin in hospitals right now, so at least some of them should become addicts. But this has been closely studied. It doesn't happen. Your grandmother wasn't turned into a junkie by her hip replacement. Why is that? Our current theory of addiction comes in part from a series of experiments that were carried out earlier in the 20th century. The experiment is simple. You take a rat and put it in a cage with 2 water bottles. One is just water, the other is water laced with heroin or cocaine. Almost every time you run this experiment, the rat will become obsessed with the drugged water and keep coming back for more and more until it kills itself. But in the 1970s, Bruce Alexander, a professor of psychology, noticed something odd about this experiment. The rat is put in the cage all alone. It has nothing to do but take the drugs. What would happen, he wondered, if we tried this differently? So he built Rat Park, which is basically heaven for rats. It's a lush cage where the rats would have colored balls, tunnels to scamper down, plenty of friends to play with, and they could have loads of sex. Everything a rat about town could want. And they would have the drugged water and the normal water bottles. But here's the fascinating thing. In Rat Park, rats hardly ever use the drugged water. None of them ever use it compulsively. None of them ever overdose. But maybe this is a quirk of rats, right? Well, helpfully, there was a human experiment along the same lines, the Vietnam War. 20% of American troops in Vietnam were using a lot of heroin. People back home were really panicked because they thought there would be hundreds of thousands of junkies on the streets of the United States when the war was over. But a study followed the soldiers home and found something striking. They didn't go to rehab. They didn't even go into withdrawal. 95% of them just stopped after they got home. If you believe the old theory of addiction, that makes no sense. But if you believe Professor Alexander's theory, it makes perfect sense. Because if you're put into a horrific jungle in a foreign country where you don't want to be, and you could be forced to kill or die at any moment, doing heroin is a great way to spend your time. But if you go back to your nice home with your friends and your family, it's the equivalent of being taken out of that first cage and put into a human rat park. It's not the chemicals, it's your cage. We need to think about addiction differently. Human beings have an innate need to bond and connect. When we are happy and healthy, we will bond with the people around us. But when we can't, because we're traumatized, isolated, or beaten down by life, we will bond with something that gives us some sense of relief. It might be endlessly checking a smartphone, it might be pornography, video games, Reddit, gambling, or it might be cocaine. But we will bond with something because that is our human nature. The path out of unhealthy bonds is to form healthy bonds, to be connected to people you want to be present with. Addiction is just one symptom of the crisis of disconnection that's happening all around us. We all feel it. Since the 1950s, the average number of close friends an American has been steadily declining. At the same time, the amount of floor space in their homes has been steadily increasing. To choose floor space over friends, to choose stuff over connection. The war on drugs we've been fighting for almost a century now has made everything worse. Instead of helping people heal and getting their life together, we have cast them out from society. We have made it harder for them to get jobs and become stable. We take benefits and support away from them if we catch them with drugs. We throw them in prison cells, which are literally cages. We put people who are not well in a situation that makes them feel worse and hate them for not recovering. For too long, we've talked only about individual recovery from addiction. But we need now to talk about social recovery, because something has gone wrong with us as a group. We have to build a society that looks a lot more like Rat Park and a lot less like those isolated cages. We are going to have to change the unnatural way we live and rediscover each other. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection.
Well, that's a lot of food for thought, because when I saw this clip, I thought it was intriguing, because in summary, what this researcher is saying is that it's not just the drugs that are being used, but it's your environment that is extremely important. Now, I want to just balance that up with two slides I'm going to show you. Let me show you this first slide, number 12. Slide 12. Why do people take drugs in the first place? Well, on the left-hand side, to feel good, feelings, sensations, experiences, and to share them, and then to feel better, to lessen, as I said, people who are depressed, people who are unemployed, anxiety, worries, fears, depression, hopelessness. And then the next slide, which is slide 13, the very next slide, if we can bring that one up. This was on the Time magazine some time ago, and how do we get addicted? And it says scientists are discovering the chemical secret to addiction. Drugs of abuse engage motivation and pleasure pathways of the brain. So I just want to come off that slide and just balance up, because we only have about 8 more minutes. Time has gone very quickly tonight. So we're balancing out what we saw in the clip, which said, yes, soldiers who were in Vietnam would have used heroin, but they did not become addicted to it because they came back into an environment where there was lots of support. Now, I want you to think about that carefully, because we are saying to you that there is help for addictions, and part of that help is being part of a community, having good family support. And that's why the argument of incarcerating people with really soft drugs, I'm not saying marijuana is acceptable, because marijuana is a slippery slope. You start with, and especially, I want to say that one of the things that I may not have time to show is that people who start using drugs as adolescents and teenagers, because the brain is not totally formed, the amygdala, which is an area of the brain, central part of the brain, takes priority over the frontal cortex. As an adult, if you start using marijuana in your 40s and 50s, you have a much lower risk of becoming addicted to it, as opposed to someone using marijuana at 14 or 15. That's why there's such a great concern, even here in Trinidad, that a lot of our schools, well-known schools, there's apparently a big drug problem. And if young kids at 15 and 16 start using drugs, unfortunately, they run a much higher risk. Now, I am coming across in a very passionate way, because I want to say that, it's sad when someone who's 15 and 16 starts using these drugs, and then they find out what was supposed to bring pleasure and to help them to relax from the rigors of academia, etc., becomes addictive, and then they are unable to come off of that. So we know that the addictive pathways act on the areas of the brain that deals with motivation, the pleasure pathways of the brain, etc. In fact, maybe if we can bring up slide 23, and I know we only have a few more minutes. Slide 23. This tries to show you what is called the dopamine pathways and the serotonin pathways. So you see on the left-hand side of the slide, we have the frontal cortex, which deals with reward, pleasure, motor functions, compulsion, preserving ourselves. And then you have the serotonin pathways, which deal with, that's the area of the hippocampus, which deals with function, mood, memory, processing, sleep, cognition. Sorry, I'm rushing because we only have about 6 more minutes. We can come off that slide now. And we just want to summarize what we're saying here now. So the point I'm making is this, that when we talk about addictions, it could be hidden addictions like gambling that is becoming more and more acceptable. And we need to be on our guard. And one of the clips that we started off with showed that, and part of the information I shared with you was that gambling is starting at a younger and younger age, because you have internet gambling, you have internet poker. You know, poker, which is considered an acceptable card game in lots of social circles, is highly addictive, and people lose lots of money. And then we went on to talk about chemical dependency. But as I end the program, what I want to say is that we know that people don't often choose to become addicts. They don't choose to become dependent on alcohol or marijuana or cocaine. They may begin in a very innocent way, just to relax or find some level of pleasure, because they find pleasure in nothing else. And when I put on my pastoral hat, I will touch on that. But the support mechanisms are extremely important. So what the last clip showed, very importantly, what the last clip showed was that if you are able to access a very, very strong community, and that's where faith communities come in. And as part of our own faith community, the Anaposis Chapel, we have a rehabilitation program which is linked to our medical center. So we have the Anaposis Medical Center and we have the Anaposis Chapel. And within the Anaposis Chapel, we have a faith community that can give you support to help you to deal with all of these addictions. And what the research is showing is that people who are really wrapped up with what we think would be very addictive patterns of behavior, if they find a very supportive network, either within a family setting or within a faith community, within a social group, then they're able to overcome their addiction. So I've painted a kind of gloomy picture of addictions, but I want to end on a positive note by saying that there's hope. There's hope if you find yourself, or if you know a family member who's wrapped up with addiction, then you need to access help. You can ring us on 482-4269. If we can't help you, we can put you on to different people, but we do have a program called Celebrate Recovery, which is able to help you with the pathway to healing. So as I put on my pastoral hat in ending, this touches on addiction. I have started the new year sharing with our church that we have choices in life. And we have challenged our church, the Anaposis Chapel, to make choices that can give you healthy outcomes in 2018. And, you know, very often we play a blame game. We make poor choices in life, and then we want to blame our husbands or wives or brothers or sisters or extended family members. One of the marks of a mature person is that when you make poor choices, you are able to stand up and start over again. Now, I think we're going to have to end now, but we have 1 more minute, I think. Okay, so I have an earpiece. I apologize for this. I'm still getting used to my earpiece. So I want to encourage you, when you think about making choices, you think about wise choices. And over the last week or two, we have been kicking off a series called What on Earth Am I Here For? I want to say to you, if you discover your purpose, why God has created you, you will find passion and pleasure in life. You will find such a degree of pleasure and passion that you will not have to resort to alcohol. You will not have to resort to gambling. You will not have to resort to all the things that can draw you into addictive patterns of behavior. So as I end tonight, I want to say the first choice you need to make is find your true identity. Do not let anyone else label you. Do not let anyone else tell you who you should be. I want to encourage you to develop a relationship with God, Father God, through Jesus Christ, and let him allow you to discover that path. What on earth am I here for? I'm here to fulfill God's plan and purpose for my life. I hope you have enjoyed this program on addictions. If you have questions, you can ring us on 482-4269, 482-4269, and this program is going to be replayed over the next 2 weeks on Wednesday nights, 8 p.m., Thursdays at 1 p.m., and Sunday evenings at 7 p.m. Thank you for joining us for Your Health, Your Choice, and we return with another program in a week or two. Thank you very much.